Welcome, everybody, to this week's Take Charge of Your Life discussion, where we give you tips and tricks on how to live more empowered, live more free, and live more healthy. Our version of mind, body, and soul wellness. My name is Tish Taylor. My company is Growth Centric Living. I am a mindset trainer and a personal transformation guide. I feel very strongly about assisting people along their journey to be the best versions of themselves, and not just empowering people and leaders, but also having that generational and community impact for generations to come. And this is my co-host, Roberta.
Hey everyone, welcome to our discussion. And I just want to share that I am a holistic health practitioner, the owner of Wake Up to Life Wellness. I love seeing people transform in mind, body, and soul. I guess I had this vision like 12 years ago, and now it's, really part of what we're doing and part of my life and my focus for my life work. And I'm so thrilled to be here and really want people to see that they can live, empowered in every area of their life, as we'll be sharing. And then just that quiet life of desperation that I lived, that no one else we don't have to live in that state, our whole life. That trauma recovery doesn't take a lifetime, and that we can really live into our amazing and abundant life so much quicker when we walk the path that we're sharing with you today.
As both certified elite mentorship forum trainers, we have been trained under our mentor, Mr. Peter Sage. For those of you that may not be familiar with his work, he actually just did his 7th TED Talk. Got an award within the last few months for being the top 10 motivational speakers in the world. He is a human behavior and self-mastery expert and has shared stages with the likes of Richard Branson and prestigious awards like Nelson Mandela. So our format here today is to give you a little video, a snippet of Peter teaching a lesson, and then we're going to break it down and give you some tips and some tangible ways about how we apply that lesson to our life in our 3 areas of mindset, body, and soul wellness.
Awesome. Our topic for today is going to be reflected in emotional maturity versus physical maturity. And Peter's on his reel that we're going to share, he's going to be talking about what he calls the Atlas of Awareness, which is just his redefining the map of consciousness that was created by Dr. David Hawkins. And it's really showing us that people operate from different levels of awareness, or what we call consciousness, for anything from fear and anger up to courage, love, and peace. And so we're all at different places on the map. And when we understand that, then we let go of our judgment. And instead of trying to win, we simply rise higher ourselves. So we become the invitation, for other people to follow, so that we're not thinking we have to be right. So we'll listen into his video here.
How old were you when you realized that you couldn't win an argument no matter who you were arguing with? In fact, some people still haven't got to that level of awareness yet. But let me explain it this way. There is a difference between emotional maturity and physical maturity. And people can only hear from the level they're at. After all, everybody thinks that they're right, otherwise they wouldn't be saying what they're saying. But if you're at the top of a mountain and you're telling somebody what an amazing sunset it is, but they're at the bottom of their mountain of awareness in their emotional journey of maturity, they can't see the sunset. They're seeing trees, so they think you're lying and they're arguing. They're not about who's right or wrong. It's about whose truth is right for them at this point. So if you're trying to get your point of view across to somebody by saying it over and over, louder and louder, then understand something. Everybody can only hear from the level they're at, and that's okay. You can invite them up the mountain, but don't judge them for where they are on it.
In mindset, really what we're talking about is that empowerment comes from recognizing that everyone is operating at their own level of awareness. Peter differentiates between physical and emotional maturity here, meaning that, we all have an age. We have a calendar age. Physically, there's nothing we can do about how our body, well, there is, but over the number of calendar years that we have, been on this journey, that is just a number that happens. It has to do with time. Versus emotionally and mentally, we all are on our own journey. And whether, we're 85 or 10, that could be very different. I'm sure some of you have seen or met some, children, we call them old souls, that maybe at a higher emotional level than maybe some of the adults that you are aware of in your life. So this is essentially kind of what we're talking about when we talk about, the levels of awareness or consciousness here is that emotional maturity, the inner world level of maturity. And when you're arguing with someone who's at a different level than you are, you're not really communicating. It's essentially you're speaking different languages. You don't have the same perspective on the world. Your reality can be totally different. Like he explained, there's somebody that's on the top of the mountain versus somebody that is, at the bottom in the trees. They have a very different viewpoint on life, and neither one is right or wrong. It just is how it is. By looking into emotional maturity, this means that, as we move up the mountain, we start to let go of the need to be right. Instead, we're focusing on, being aligned and our own inner world. You get your confidence from within, from our own intuition, our own heart, versus seeking outer world validation, which means that we don't need people to agree with us anymore as we move up those levels of awareness and mature more in our emotional maturity. For me, this has been a fundamental mindset shift. It has, allowed me to accept people for who they are. I don't need to argue anymore. I don't need to waste my energy, as Peter talks about, arguing with people, because it's okay. Whatever they believe versus what I believe, that's okay. I can accept that now. I don't feel this need now to judge them because they're on a different page. And if I'm being honest, really, if that came from me needing my own validation, that came from my own level of maturity, where I was like, well, if somebody else doesn't agree with me, then like, am I wrong? I started to question myself internally, and that didn't feel so good. So this allows me to just accept it. They are who they are. They are living from their own journey, and that can be right. And I can live in a lot more peace that way, and wish them well and not have this need to be right. I don't feel the need to argue.
Yes, it is a whole different world when we are not in the position of duality and defensiveness, a defensive posture in life. I find too that being able to let go of proving myself in any way to other people has made life so much more relaxing and enjoyable, and just, so much less judgmental. I don't need to judge myself, and I don't need to judge them for their point of view. And I was thinking, I looked up on AI how many people there are in the world, and now there's over 8 billion people, according to their numbers. And every single person in the world, there's no two people that have the exact same viewpoint on anything and everything in life, so to expect someone else to look through my lens and see life exactly like I do is so silly, really. When we think about it, just like, oh my gosh, that's ridiculous, to even expect that. But yet in our design and in our mindset and how we've all, like we talked about the archetypes, we all have a different operating system, and we all think our way is right. So who's right? And I love how Peter just puts it into such clear understanding. And like you shared, Tish, that nobody's wrong. We're all seeing it exactly the way we're seeing it. We can't see it any different at that moment in time. And so I know sometimes it gets harder when we're in a really hard situation where somebody's, we're at the verge of a divorce or some really traumatic thing. And it's hard to just let go of our wanting someone to see our point of view. I was convinced that I could help people see my point of view if I just used enough ideas or enough creativity or enough books or enough resources or enough, anger or something to manipulate them into to come to my side and to see things my way. And that's been the hardest lesson of my whole life, is to let people be who they are and not think they have to be different.
It's funny when we start to kind of become aware of these concepts, and you can see how, people that we have zero attachment to, it's a little bit easier to just, kind of shrug them off and be like, oh, that's okay. They think that way, or etc. We don't have as much of a need to try to convince them into something. Whereas people that we care about, especially, as parents, our children, or people that are close to us, like potentially, a spouse or family members, and you feel like so strongly like you can help them, that you have the right answer, you have the key that will, make their life better, and they just can't hear you. And creates, a lot of frustration. But this same concept that we're talking about applies to all of those situations. Our children are on their own journey. Our, one spouse or etc., they're on their own journey, and we really can't convince anybody otherwise. They're going to do what is right for them and what makes sense to them. All we can do is kind of love them. It doesn't mean that we don't, sometimes extend the olive branch and at least give invitations, especially if we can see a clearer path. And you and I, Roberta, in this work that we do, definitely can feel like we can see this clear path to assist people out of some of the darkness and some of the more struggling paths that they're on. But we don't have a right to pull anyone and or judge them. So it's just about kind of keeping that invitation, but then also keeping this mindset in mind of accepting they are where they're at, and that's okay.
Yeah, and I think the mature mentality, more mature for me as I go along, is that knowing that every single person is on the right path for them. Mm-hmm. It's not even a matter of them being on the wrong path and I wish they would just hear, but they don't have to hear me. It's that they are on the right path. Like wherever they're at is where they're meant to be. And letting people go completely, and knowing that if I interfere, I could be taking them off their path or preventing them from hearing a lesson that they need to hear for their higher growth, for the next part of their journey, some strength they need to build, some resilience they need to build. And so it's kind of like a hands-off approach. When I was in recovery doing codependent recovery work, it was like they would say that, other people's choices are none of my business, literally. And it was such a great, simple way of looking at it. It's like, just take your hands off, and walk away. I always thought of it as setting people free, let them live their journey, because obviously their path was designed for them. And I don't have to play God and say, though, they're on the wrong path, or my idea of their path is better. It's just not my business.
Well said. So just to give you a little bit more context here in what this looks like, lower levels of maturity. And we're saying lower levels, being at the bottom of the mountain, but that's just a way to kind of like rank things. We mean no disrespect by it, but somebody who might be at some of those other levels is, they tend to react quickly. They get insulted easily and allow anger and fear to dominate their reactions. That's a sign of somebody that maybe hasn't matured as much on their emotional maturity journey. Versus higher levels of awareness, this person looks like, they know that they have nothing to prove to anyone but themselves. They are a little more quiet, accepting of others, and provide advice when asked versus trying to force their model of the world on others. So taking all of that into consideration, our tip for this section is to invite you to take out your journal and think of a situation that you are in conflict with somebody. Maybe it's a sibling, a coworker, an ex of some sort, a friend, ex-boyfriend, ex-husband, and look at the situation again from this empowering mindset. Look at the situation from the eyes of everyone is on their own level of maturity, regardless of their actual physical age. And, this is their journey, and it's blessed and it's right for them. So then ask yourself, is what I'm in conflict about really important? Can I accept that they have a different viewpoint and neither of us is actually wrong?
I love it. So the next section we'll be talking about is living healthy in the physical body. And when we think of, reacting, right, I think of how when we encounter any kind of conflict or judgment or things get heated, our nervous system reacts even before the mind thinks about how it's reacting, because it's just programmed, right? We're programmed to respond to threat. And when we do that, our heart rate rises, our breath can get shortened, our muscles contract, we get tensed up. And then we've shifted from connecting with that person to being defensive. And we all know what that feels like. And it's just no fun. And so when we feel those physical cues, it's like information of, like, it can be feedback for us, right? To help us to intercept that response. So we can think about that in our physical body, like some people's faces turn red or they clench their fists, right? If we can read ourselves and start thinking about that, and how do we really show up, or do we give people that the eye, right? As our kids, when they were growing up, giving them that that look. We think about how we're reacting physically and how it's escalating our own physiology to a cortisol response, and we can start intercepting that and claim our power back, and then of course show up in a way that's going to help people evolve rather than hinder them or try to force them or cause resistance or cause them to want to get away from us and not listen to us at all. So in this atlas of awareness, or this map of consciousness we've been referring to, each emotional frequency has a physical like reflection, like it expresses itself in our physical nature. So like shame and guilt will pull the body inward and kind of cause us to fold up and collapse. I used to do a lot of that when I, over the years, I just had so much shame, such a shame base. And people would say, you walk with your head down all the time. And I was just like closed in, and even now, this is, like 15 years ago when I start really diving deep into working this, and I constantly remind myself to sit up straight, because that was, what I did for, about 48 years of my life. I was really shrunk. Courage and acceptance, though, on the other hand, if we have the higher frequencies and the higher maturity in these areas of awareness, it causes our chest to open up. We lift our spine up, like I was sharing, with our posture. And we really feel that we're giving out something good to someone, like peace or love. It expands us. Our energy is radiating, and our breathing is slower. It's almost like we take charge of what's happening within us, and then we can regulate that better than if we're just reacting out of some kind of threat that we feel is a threat.
I think that this is such important information for us to realize, the fact that we are both like human and being, as Peter always says, our physical body reacts to so many things, often before our mind even has the opportunity to think. I can start to feel myself as I move into, these levels of awareness in, like, why am I triggered right now? And be able to like step back and disassociate what my body is reacting, because I know that it's reacting to patterns that, I have created over my lifetime, and start to, really embody that mind over matter kind of thing, or, mind over body sort of thing, where if we allow those emotions, especially some of those heavy ones like stress, etc., or feeling defensive, to flood our system, then our mind goes offline, right? And we've all kind of had those fight or flight experiences where our executive function and our thinking, our ability to think rationally, just like disappears.
Mm-hmm.
And so if we can intercept this, then we can try to stay calm in these moments. And, we even use some of the other tips we've talked about in other videos where, why am I being triggered? Can I break this down to figure out if this is something I really want to be upset about, or do I want to choose that empowering mindset that we were talking about before, and calm my body down instead and teach it something different?
Right. I think that, you were talking about the stress response. When we get into stress, that is such a huge, huge impact on our physical and mental health. But, the definition of stress that Peter uses is when we're trying to force change in our outer world. We're trying to change something that we don't have the ability to change, is kind of the definition of stress. Instantly, we start responding and reacting to that. So I love that. And when I think of the post-traumatic stress, which so many people are affected by that experience in their life, and they think it's like they're powerless over it. It feels like it, because it happens so quickly, and your system is flooded so fast. And that really was my story with the post-traumatic stress response, just aggravating and overwhelming my system so consistently for decades. And it just feels like, I just think of veterans who have those PTSD experiences in their life is just kind of like a living hell in some ways. They just can't figure out how to stop that from happening. And through the Elite Mentorship Forum, I really found the ways to stop and intercept that response before it happens. And so that has, drastically changed my life, and knowing that there is a solution for PTSD, that people don't have to just take that label and say, this is my life now. I have to live with PTSD. That's a very desperate and tormenting way to live. So there is definitely a way forward in that. And this kind of discussion really makes me think about that, and how we can, offer that solution to ourselves and to other people. So I guess my focus now would be, so when someone challenges your beliefs, instead of contracting and, letting that cortisol rise, so to speak, we can start just thinking, like Tish said, and just think about what we're doing, how we're responding, have our feet on the ground, soften our chest. I lower my shoulders. That was one of the things I learned with my recovery people, is to drop my shoulders. Smiling is another option that shifts our energy and our cortisol response. And then we literally become the calm in that storm instead of reacting to it. And people are much more drawn to that, and they're willing to listen to us and hear what's really on our hearts if we can show up in a way that's not defensive and not divisive and not reactive. And so my tip, oh, do you have something you want to share, Tish?
Sorry, just one more thing. As you're kind of talking, I was thinking about, one of the things that I'm passionate about is just teaching this. I've had to retrain myself through all of these concepts that we're talking about. Whereas, if we are able to master this for ourselves, the impact that this can have on, our children's lives, where they won't have as many years in, reactionary mode and trying to force everything to be like what they should in their world to validate themselves, like we have experienced. We can teach them these tools so much easier, where they really are the future in being able to have these tools and calm themselves and understand that it's okay wherever anyone else is at, and I can still be confident in myself. I used to say that my kids' eyes would glaze over and you could tell that their brain has gone offline. They're completely in that like stress mode and can't understand things. So how empowering it is for them to, be able to have teachers and mentors that do understand this and are able to give them these tools earlier in life.
Oh my gosh, that's really what this work is about for me too, is legacy and changing the generational direction. Thinking if I could have lived in a home where there wasn't so much anxiety and anger and high level, stress, I would have had a different life, of course, because I was trained in that for 17 years. So that was what my body did. Whatever, that environment trained it to respond the way it did and to have the mindset and the judgments that were there. So yeah, to share this with our kids and teach them, how to respond to life differently and more maturely like that without having to defend or prove themselves that would be a whole different universe to have our kids to have that empowerment so young. So the tip I have for the physical realm here with living healthy in the body is when tension rises, place your hand over your heart and say silently, my body is my ally. I choose to stay open. And then you can breathe deeply and just calm that storm even before it starts.
Beautiful. We have another video as well on just like how easily breathing brings our whole system back down. An easy tool that is available to us at any time. And that leads us into our Live More Free, the soul realm of our discussion. Here, I'd like to say that freedom is realizing that no one else's level of consciousness defines my peace or your peace. It doesn't tell a story about us where everyone else is at. We are all on our own journeys, and therefore I can stop judging others. I can stop being disappointed that other people's actions and views don't match my pictures. That's okay. Instead, I can live from a place of acceptance, and really my soul then is free. I don't feel judged either, in contrast, like I was saying, that we can accept everyone is right on their own path. Every soul has their own divine timeline, and therefore comparing or attempting to control others is all an ego-based illusion. We don't need to do that from this soul realm, from living as our highest self in, really unconditional love for everyone and where they're at. The more we trust in our own story and our own intuition, then the less we feel the need really to like force outcomes of others, of, the world around us as we see it. This is where true freedom comes from seeing that there is perfection in the process. Regardless of what the journey looks like, it is the right one for you. And we're all learning from different aspects of our lives, and there doesn't need to be judgment kind of placed on that. We can understand that everyone, including us, is exactly where we're supposed to be.
Oh, I love that. I think of if we knew our true path, our authentic path, we wouldn't have to try to prove it to so many people, right? In an outer world kind of way. It would be just, and that's really what this transformation work has been about for me, is just waking up to who I really am and then taking my power back and living out of that. So it's kind of fascinating how we spend so much of our life almost trying to prove to everyone else, our perception or how we think things should be, or whether we're right or wrong. When really, I think I'm just trying to prove it to myself. Ultimately, that's really what it came down to. And looking in the mirror and just owning my part and what I need to do to shift and transform, and then recognizing who I really am, which all of us are created in a most, magnificent way. There's nothing that we need to fix or like drastically change. We just need to realize who we are and love ourselves. I guess I think of that when you were talking, that loving ourselves is what brings that let's go of resistance and judgment of other people. If I can love myself, other people are pretty okay. I find that I judge others when I'm judging myself. And so that really coming into that inner place of loving myself, owning myself, and then just seeing the value and the gift that I have to offer to the world, brings everything into that neutrality space. And then I can see other people with so much compassion and understanding because I could see myself that way first to bring myself into that healing space. And so, yeah, I think that's what I think of with the soul realm when it comes to this level of maturity, spiritual and physical maturity.
Wow, that is so powerfully. I think that in the same terms, just to sort of reiterate kind of what you're saying, if we use that analogy that Peter used of a mountain, really love and peace is at the top. That's ultimately what we are all striving for in living truly free in who we are and what we were meant to be here in our existence. Our soul's energy is what we're all kind of looking for. So from those higher levels of maturity, we are able to, though we're using the analogy of a mountain, we're looking down, not from an ego base, but, for love, and compassion for those that are still trying to make their way up the mountain, because we know what it was like to be in the middle somewhere and be like, I don't know, am I supposed to take more steps? Like I'm unsure of myself. Should I keep climbing? Do I want these other people to kind of come with me, or all those other ways that we seek, validation really in the outer world, whereas, hindsight's 2020, they say. So from, being higher up, we can really have that compassion on our metaphorical, mountain kind of thing, and loving on not just ourselves, but everyone else that is on their own journey as well.
Yeah, I was just having a conversation with someone who Peter was saying he had a relationship with someone for 6 years and then they went different ways but they're still best friends. And she's like, well, how could that be? Usually when people part ways, they're not, in love. It's not loving and kind. A lot of times it's hostile and it's painful and everybody's hurt. And I can see that more and more because I used to be that way too. Just like if it was so painful, like how could I ever, feel good around this person again? But that's, that is the growth journey. And I really, really do see that I can see people. In fact, I feel thankful for whatever they reflected to me that showed me what I needed to change in myself. And so I can look at every single person as my teacher and know that they gave me that gift of reflection and awareness and helped me to walk this path that I'm on, which I'm so, so grateful for. So, I really can imagine, no matter what someone's done, to see them through the eyes of compassion and understanding that they were truly operating at their level of awareness. And that was all they had at the time, and I've done the same, and I've heard other people. So when we really can get to that awareness, that to me is, freedom for myself and the ability to love people without judgment has been something I've been working on for a long time. And I can feel it and experience it now, where it was really like a really struggle for most of my life before that.
It makes me think of what immaculate design this, reality is that we live in, how both can be true, that we are all on our own journeys, as well as how we interact with each other so perfectly. And like you said, allowing for those lessons, even though, from some of those lower levels of consciousness, somebody may feel like, they're a villain in your story, but really they're a blessing. Everything is actually a blessing in how we've intertwined, with each other. And so that leads us really beautifully into our last tip for our discussion today. And this one, I'm going to suggest that you do a little bit of a meditation. Close your eyes and visualize someone who frustrates you. Visualize somebody who, you've had some struggles with. And since we tend to judge children less harshly than we tend to judge others, I want you to think of them, if that helps, as a child. Think of their innocence. Think of, them being another soul that is learning and doing their best with the awareness that they have. And therefore, from that space, you can breathe love into that image and wish them peace along their own growth journey. This practice instantly expands your vibration and aligns you with the source level compassion that we've been discussing.
Yeah, that's a perfect way of getting into the energy of how this can actually feel for us when we can get to that place. And knowing that just because we see people differently and that we're willing to see them through the eyes of understanding and compassion doesn't mean we still hang out with people who are very, toxic and harmful, but we're just choosing to see them differently for our healing and our, expression and for our maturity and growth. So this leads us to our summary for the topics or the sections that we talked about today. So in the mind and the live empowered realm, we talked about emotional maturity means letting go of the need to be right. And instead we focus on being in alignment, getting our confidence from within, right? From our intuition, from our heart, from our knowing our path that we're supposed to be on versus looking for the outer world to validate us and needing others to agree with us. In the body and the physical realm, we talked about when someone challenges your beliefs, instead of reacting through contraction, you can feel your feet on the ground, soften your chest, and then breathe into your belly. These simple actions will communicate to my body that I'm safe and that I choose understanding over defense. And in the soul realm, we just talked that true freedom comes from seeing the perfection in the process, understanding that everyone is exactly where they're meant to be, including you.
So if you are aligning with this discussion today, it's important to state that, this is our number 37 discussion in our talk. So we're starting to get to some of these more in-depth concepts of what we teach in our premium program with our mentor, Peter Sage, in the Elite Mentorship Forum. And so we want to invite you on a journey. If this speaks to you and speaks into your heart, then we have cohorts that are starting soon, and you can find out more information and come along with us to really live a more free, a more empowered, and ultimately more healthy life, both physically and mentally through this journey.
Yes, very well said. And so that invitation is there, and we welcome people to just have curiosity around the process and the journey, because everyone's seeking to level up in their life and become a better version of themselves. And this is just it's a journey that pays dividends on and on and on. It just never stops. And so, yeah, we're so grateful to be on this path, and we look forward to connecting with you somewhere on this journey.
Our curiosity calls or initial call is always free. So it costs you nothing to reach out and just see if this is right for you. See if you are in alignment and ready to be on a path that will fundamentally change all areas of your life, but ultimately give you more space to have more joy and more fulfillment in your life.
Absolutely. And so we'll close today with a quote that says, "The higher you rise in awareness, the less you need to be right, and the more you're free to be kind." So we just thank you guys for joining us today and sharing our discussion with us. And we look forward to seeing you again.
Stay tuned for our next Take Charge of Your Life discussion.